It's interesting because most people, when they put money in the market, unless they're seasoned investors or unless they're fairly business savvy, they don't realize that a typical market cycle, meaning start point A to point Z, is roughly 4 to 6 years. Sometimes it's a little longer, sometimes it's a little shorter, depending on what's going on in the market. And they get impatient. Oh, I bought this, I put money in the market yesterday and it hasn't gone up yet. In fact, it's gone down. Well, and? Are you a trader or are you an investor? Take your pick. Which one are you going to be? Because over time, the market generally has gone up. In fact, let me strike that. Over time, the market has always gone up. Now, is that going to continue into the foreseeable future? I don't know. Are we going to go into the doldrums into the foreseeable future? I don't know. What I do know is that we can't keep going at the rate we're going. Fed doesn't have to do anything. The central bank in Europe hasn't done anything. They haven't cut any interest rates. They've refused to march lockstep with the Fed. The reason the Fed eases interest rates, and these are short-term interest rates, meaning what banks, the interest rate the banks borrow money from the Federal Reserve, and the rate that banks charge each other to borrow overnight, the overnight lending rate, that rate is what the Feds are controlling, short-term interest rates. And what that does is typically when the interest rate is lower, it makes money easier to get, which means that businesses can borrow more, ideally to expand, meaning they can buy more materials, they can hire more people, they can upgrade their systems, that kind of thing. Whereas when money is tight or when interest rates are higher, you have a situation where businesses are reluctant to do that. They won't buy that new plant. They won't buy the new equipment. They won't hire new people. They won't expand. And when they don't expand, what they're looking to do is get more out of the people they already have. And that's why that's why there's a number that comes out called worker productivity. And that number tends to go up, especially in lean times, because people realize if I'm not doing my job, I won't have one. And so they get a little more motivated about maintaining their job because they see Joe and Sue and Sally and Bob standing in the unemployment line. And they don't want that to be them. And unfortunately, as businesses become leaner and meaner, that's the current environment in which we find ourselves. We talked about gross. Again, so say your employer decides they're paying you $10 an hour. You work 10 hours, you expect $100. Net, that's that amount of money. Remember I talked about how I got my first paycheck and it was X minus all these other things? That's the net. The net is that part that you take home. So you start off with this, and unless you engage in savvy tax planning, you end up with this. So the goal is to keep as much of this as possible. The interest rates have compressed, and unfortunately we have a situation where inflation is on an uptick. They don't want to acknowledge it when they put out all these reports that they do. But what I do know is that our groceries cost more from month to month. What I do know is that it costs me more money to fill up my gas tank from month to month, sometimes week to week, and other times day to day. What I do know is that it costs me more for a suit or for furniture than it did a year ago or 2 years ago. That's inflation. That's when the cost of goods and services go up year over year for the same thing. Now, that person working at McDonald's or the people with smaller incomes, they're going to feel it in a disproportionate way for the simple reason that they're making less money. So a greater percentage of this has to go for things that they have to do anyway. It goes back to that fixed cost that we talked about. Meaning you got to get to work, be it mass transit or your own vehicle, you got to pay to get there. It's that simple. And oh, by the way, you got to have a phone or some kind of communication device, be it a landline, be it a cell phone. That's not going down. And when was the last time you opened up your one of your bills and it said, "Oh, we've decided to charge you less this month." I don't know about you, but if I've got the same usage on a given product, I have yet to hear them to open up the envelope and for them to say, "We're charging you less this month." Typically, things only go up in cost. This is what we call taxation with representation. With or without, I just don't like it. However, they manage to keep our schools open, our roads paved, our fire departments well funded and staffed, our military maintained, our elected officials paid for, staffed, and on and on and on, pay for the EPA, keep our air and water clean. And that's a good chunk of what you're paying for when you pay your federal and state taxes. That's pretty much it. You also have to pay into Medicare, and you also have to pay into Social Security, something that, unless is fixed, very few of the people watching this will ever get more out than they put in, or even the same amount. And then if you're a union individual, well, you've got to pay your union dues. Or if you're a member of a guild, you've got to pay the guild dues. Or if you have to participate in healthcare expenses, say your employer offers a health plan, which is a wonderful thing. Well, guess what? Most employers aren't going to foot the whole bill on that. They're going to expect you to pay your share. You're going to have to pay your portion of the medical, your portion of the dental, your portion of the vision, if they offer all three. Because a lot of employers don't offer all three, and some don't offer any. So all these things come out prior to you getting your check. So as I tell my son, education is key. It's freedom. It is your ticket to ride. You got to have a skill or knowledge that people are willing to pay you for.